Hi, welcome back to Z-fari, the video novel. Today we're going to read the first part of chapter 13. So kick back, relax, and enjoy yourself. Here we go. Over the next 10 days, some incidents appeared to crawl along in stultifying and unremarkable routine, seemingly no nearer to their conclusions than they had ever been, while other events occurred quickly and dramatically. Sergeant Earhart and Trooper Reed finally completed the platform inspections. It took 2 days longer than Earhart had anticipated. With the help of Trooper Reed's exhaustive notes, interviews with platform troopers, and perceptive observations, Sergeant Earhart's plan to scrutinize platform operations in order to improve order and efficiency had grown legs of its own and now ran ahead of her, looking back and making faces at her, daring her to follow it. There was much more here than she had originally expected to find. There would be much more boring paperwork. There would be staff shakeups. There would be new ways of doing the patrol's job. Eventually, those guarding the wall and stopping the zombies would benefit. But until that eventually actually occurred, there would be anger, hurt feelings, upset, and upheaval in a group of people who thrived on the simple act of shooting undies in the head. Down in the basement lab, Dr. McDougall continued to revise his experimental protocol since Willie, his human subject in zombification, had the continuing poor manners to heal much more slowly than the doctor's schedule had originally allowed for. McDougall knew that if Willie had not healed sufficiently from the initial Phase 3 trial, leg biting or zombie gastroanemical mastication, he would not survive the second Phase 3 trial, biting the thorax or abdomen, or zombie abdominal or thoracic mastication. The completion of Phase 3 and the start of Phase 4 would have to wait until Willie was released from the intensive care portion of his convalescent. In addition, the cell was still not finished. Alice, or was it Allison, had brought him almost daily revisions and additions to the doctor's original plans for the experimental enclosure. Most of her ideas were quite good and showed a sharp analytical and scientific mind. More than once she had mentioned that she would feel honored to be included in his study as editor, contributor, or second author. Dr. McDougall had been drinking his morning cup of Earl Grey tea when she first proposed that nonsense, and it took all of his self-control not to spit the tea all over his desk. But he had decided to tell her that her work was a valuable addition to his study, praise her repeatedly, and even show her her name on the title page of the study on his computer before he submitted it. That would shut her up, and he could delete her name and any mention of her in the research with a simple keystroke. At any rate, Willie was healing. It would be another 10 days before he would be ready for his next meeting with Jerry the zombie. The cell, it appeared, would take another week or so. McDougall was eager to begin, but needed Willie to survive until Phase 4. Besides, Dr. McDougall was discovering information now that could well alter the Phase 4 protocol and give him the secret to zombification. Corporal DeBigny would complete the training of the recruits in another week or so. It was beginning to look as though the recruits would finish their training with only one fatality, John Bender. One morning, with about a week to go, the recruits assembled outside the barracks for morning inspection. John Bender was not there. Corporal DeBigny asked where he was. No one answered. She asked again, and there was still no response from any of the 9. She had them stand at attention while she inspected the barracks. She found John in his bed, the covers neatly tucked in, with his head bashed in as though with a large hammer, and his throat neatly cut. When the blankets were removed from the bed, it was found that he had been indecently mutilated. At least that is how the Patrol Criminal Investigative Committee, CIC, described it in their report. None of the recruits admitted to knowing anything. When the CIC, specially trained and equipped teams capable of rapid response to uncommon law enforcement situations requiring special tactics, techniques, and investigative methods within the patrol, interviewed the 9, their responses to the questioning were almost identical. When they went to bed, he was alive. When they woke up, he did not turn out for inspection. The CIC also found that while every one of the recruits, including John's brother and sister, thoroughly detested John Bender, none seemed to have a realistic motive for killing John 2 or 3 times. While every one of the recruits, including John's brother and sister, had ample opportunity to kill John Bender, none of the recruits would admit to being awake at any time between 9 that night and 6 that morning, and every single one of the recruits professed to being a very sound sleeper, capable of sleeping through nearly anything short of carpet bombing. And while every one of the recruits, including John John's brother and sister, possessed sufficient means to kill John John Bender, when the collection of the recruits' personal weapons, from rifles to shotguns to pistols to hatchets to knives to knitting needles to machetes to kamas to assorted dirks, daggers, and stilettos, and even a kabutoir that appeared on the CIC doorstep one day, to truncheons to shillelaghs — Grace O'Malley kept one under her bed for luck — to cautious to Ted Lawrence's warhammer that was apparently a family heirloom that had once belonged to his beloved maiden Aunt Harriet, to a Thor's hammer that may have had a more religious than martial importance to its owner, were inventoried, cataloged, and examined for seriological evidence. Nothing incriminating was found. Kate Bender offered that it might have been Colonel Mustard with the candlestick in the library, but her brother John elbowed her in the ribs so hard that she stopped giggling and hit him in the ear with her elbow. The CIC investigators had to spend 5 or 6 minutes breaking up that fight. The investigation took a day that might have been spent in training. Corporal DeBigny decided to wait and see if her recruits needed to make up that day. They were a fairly efficient bunch of killers already, and most of the time they followed her orders to the letter. Ike and Bebe decided to go to Peck on Saturday morning to see if the post office would make a good location for hunting undies, and if it would provide a secure stronghold for the hunters if the undead threatened to overwhelm them before they could be rescued. Bebe arrived at the 119th Street platform at 8 a.m. and found Ike waiting. They called up to the platform. "Hello, the platform. Ike Hayes and Bebe Duvalier asking permission to come up." A dark-haired woman peeked over the edge of the platform next to the stairs and shouted down, "Come on up, troopers." Ike and Bebe hurried up the stairs. They had each come equipped with their personal arms. Ike wore his .45 filled governor on his hip and carried one of his daddy's Kalashnikovs, a couple of extra clips for the AK-47, a couple of extra clips for the handgun, and a hard rock hammer and another belt around his waist. And Bebe had brought the Marlin, the Glock, and his papa's knife, along with a bandolier of ammo for the rifle and 4 extra clips in his belt for the pistol. Both Ike and Bebe had clipped the heavy-duty tactical flashlights to their belts. At the top of the stairs, a brunette woman who introduced herself as Mary Reed. She carried an AR-15 style rifle and a nasty-looking Sig Sauer pistol that could have been bred from the same mother as the AR. Mary noticed the men looking at her guns and said, "They're both 5.56 NATO. The pistol's a Sig, but the rifle's an Aero Precision AC-15M. I see you two gents are loaded for bear, too." They spent a few minutes making small talk about their respective weaponry. Then Ike said, Mary, Bebe and I work the 8 to 4 and midnight to 8 shifts on 119th during the week." Mary nodded and told him, "I know you boys by reputation. We've got some things to take care of down in Z-land. We're going to take Smith's coal roller for a ride. We'll be back before you get off shift unless the undies get us," Ike said, laughing. "Is there anything you need done on the platform or down in the garage while we're here?" "No thanks, fellas," Mary said. "I'd like to get some mudding done on my day off, too. Don't get dead, boys." Bebe said, "No, ma'am," and went to the ladder, opened the hatch, and climbed down. Ike followed close behind him. Ike and Bebe advanced toward the garage in a side-by-side formation, Ike moving 10 or 15 feet, covered by Bebe, pausing at cover and then letting Bebe move ahead until he reached cover. The two troopers maintained interlocking fields of fire and staggered movement as they moved from the wall to the garage. When they reached the garage, Bebe turned his back to Ike to cover their rear while Ike opened the doors. Ike slipped inside and turned on the lights, and Bebe stood just inside the door scanning the area for zombies. While Bebe watched, Ike fired up the diesel truck and pulled out of the garage. He tossed Bebe the garage keys from the truck's cabin. Bebe locked it up and then sprinted to the passenger door, opened it, and jumped inside. Ike roared out of there, lifting an arm outside the driver's window in farewell as he saw Mary on the point of the platform. She waved back. About 3 minutes of twisty, bumpy ride later, their truck bounced onto a 2-lane paved road, West 119th Street South, downtown Z-land. Ike put the pedal to the floor, and less than 2 minutes later, Ike and Bebe rolled into Peck. They passed the burger joint, weeds poking from cracks in the concrete parking lot, and 4 blocks later on the right they came to the post office. It was a small 1-story building with a flat roof and an air conditioning unit on top. There was a wide spot in the road in front of the building that once had served as a parking lot. At the front corner of the 40 by 30-foot building, an angled single-glass door provided entry to a long corridor filled with post office boxes, each accessible by key, and at the end of the hallway a 6-foot-long counter with a door behind that led into the work area of the postal station. The two men entered the building, taking note that the glass door was still intact but unlocked. When zombies came, no one was apparently concerned any longer about the security of the United States mail. They walked in and jumped the counter, walked through the door into the workroom. It was dark, but a dozen small windows just below the ceiling let in some light. There were tables, a couple of chairs, a large canvas basket on wheels, 2 canvas mail bags still filled with mail, a metal spiral staircase to the roof, and a large metal garage-style door. Ike told Bebe to cover him, and Ike unlatched the door and then pulled on ropes at the side of the door. As the door slid up and opened, Bebe half expected that a wave of crazed zombies would surge through the door, but the only thing outside of the post office was an empty loading dock area. He closed the door and secured it. Bebe went up the metal steps, opened a thick metal door, and stepped out onto the gravel surface of the roof. He walked around, noticing that the roof was bordered with a curb and flashing that was a little over a foot high. A few sandbags added to this would make for a very defensible rampart. Ike joined Bebe on the roof. Ike pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Rick? Good. Just checking the phone reception from the Safari site. Yep, I'll be in touch." He hung up. "Hey," Bebe said, and pointed. "Look." Ike turned to his left. "I see it, an undie." "There's another one," Bebe said, pointing a block down the street in the opposite direction. "There are 2 more," Bebe said again. Ike nodded. "This place is zombie central, Bebe. If we can get our supplies over here ahead of time, we should be okay." "We can take the Donaldsons on their safari next Friday night after you get off work, Bebe," Ike said. "We can haul supplies over here during the week. Give me a minute to get the GPS coordinates for this place on my cell. There, let's get out of here. When we get back over the wall, we can get a beer and plan out what we'll need. Then I'll call the Donaldsons and let them know that we are on for next Friday night. You get off at 4 and the sun doesn't set until 6 or so we can tell the Donaldsons to meet us at the coordinates around 5:30. Then it'll be a 2-day camping trip. I'll bring the s'mores, and we'll each be $20,000 richer." Ike reached up to high-five Bebe. Bebe slapped hands, but he didn't feel very well.